Hi, Patreon people.
Patrons,
You know who you are.
and you are loved. I
You are
follow
Patreon people.
I am a Patreon for a friend of mine who started a publishing company, and it's called Borderline Press, and they do really cool shit.
Nice.
Um, and she just sent me like my monthly, like they do like mostly like photo books and zines and stuff like that. And sent me a bunch of stuff that's really cool, and then sent me this little skeleton hand for Halloween
That's
that
cute.
they made. Yeah, it's a little pin, so I can pin my hair up. Like,
Nice. And have a skeleton in your hair.
yeah, there you go. I love
New
it.
brings a whole new definition to the saying like, "I'll get out of your hair."
Uh-huh. Yes, and then I just messed up my hair now, so I gotta fix this shit. Oh God, this is such a pain in the ass. Just gonna shave my head.
All right, I'm clearing a little bit of room on my computer just to make sure that I don't run out of it.
So speaking of it, we are recording on cryptids today, and I guess Pennywise could be a cryptid, but
Oh yeah, yeah. I felt like there were more that it didn't occur to me. Like we didn't talk about in the or UAP episode was Nope, the movie.
oh yeah.
And
So I
so,
haven't seen it yet. So
are there other sky cryptids that we can
oh
like
yeah, we're gonna
maybe
talk about Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds? Okay.
Yeah, I tried to pull one from each category. So there's an aquatic, there's a terrestrial, and there's an aerial one in there, and then there's like some supernatural shit in there, like the Mothman and whatnot.
What about the this was that nine-tailed fox that was on the Lovecraft Country show. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I don't remember what that one was called.
That'd be kind of...
But there's, I mean, there's so many. I mean, every state has their own cryptids. I've got a book. Let
Oh
me see.
shit. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
every state has their own cryptids. Um, where is
Is it cryptids by zip code?
it? Yeah, I got cryptids in all the area codes. Um, no, where is it? There's the witches book. I think it's coming. Oh, actually, so I know. So there's an entire book called "Cryptid Creatures of Florida," and it's just a bunch of arrest records. No, but there's like, I mean,
Nice.
there's a ton, and like there's a this is dedicated to fans of cryptozoology and the fellows at Pangea Institute who have indulged my ongoing fascination with unknown animals. This person's like right down the road from me.
Wow.
But this has got um, giant catfish and sturgeon, giant alligators, the giant Juno worm, Lake Worth sea monster, the muck monster, the sea devil, the three-toed monster, pterosaurs in Palm Beach, thunderbird, hog Kong, Okeechobee serpent, the elusive jaguarundi, the Carabel cat mystery, the Wampus cat, the chupacabra, the cracker dog killer, Aster dinosaur, and this is a 200-page book. The
Wow.
Lake Clinch monster, the Pensacola sea monster, St. Augustine's giant octopus, megalodons, um, all that stuff. And there are pictures. So this is great. This is the plesiosaur.
Okay, yeah. Sure.
It makes sense. Um, this is my favorite, the muck monster. It is a just so you folks can see it. It's got googly eyes.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, this is the kind of shit. Um, yeah, there's a whole section on avian anomalies. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's cool. I'm excited to read this one day. Just for the
Yeah.
sheer shits and giggles of it. Yeah.
Um,
So
I actually really like the idea of just doing of just like at some point at the end of the episode, like just grab that book and just list off some just as like these are fun things to, and we're not going to explain them, just say like this is what it's called.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
I actually wanted to pull up Did you mention the urine?
The urine, no, I go over. So the main ones I cover are Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster, Mothman, Mongolian death worms, and then I talk about the Yeti, the Thunderbird, the Jersey Devil, the Yowie, the skunk ape, the chupacabra, the Ningen, and you put in Will o' the Wisp. So those are the ones that we talk about briefly in here.
Okay. Do you have any plant-based cryptids?
Skunk ape is close, but not quite. Skunk ape is just basically like a mossy Bigfoot in Florida.
Okay. There are there are two, one that I just found when I was pulling up these lists. That would be fun to talk about. One is there was this idea that there was a vegetable you could grow that was biologically a lamb, but it was grown out of the ground. And if you
Hmm.
severed it would like grew on like a vine, and if you cut the vine, then the lamb would die.
Oh,
Um, and that obviously isn't real. The other one in Chinese mythology is something called the Jinmenju, and this is a human tree hybrid that grows smiling human heads for fruit, and then the
that
seeds are
is
also supposed to look for
horrifying.
it. Yeah. Um, yeah. Mysterious plant. Okay, that one does sound really grossly weird.
Yeah.
Um, oh man.
I'm sending you the Ningen because I want you to see, or the Ninjin, because I want you to see what the artist interpretation is as we record this. Um, I can show
Yeah,
everybody real quick so the patrons can see this. Um, let me see. Am I able to share? Am I allowed to share?
you should be able to. Yeah.
Okay. Look at this thing. This is
Awesome,
this is so good. This is an Arctic cryptid, and I'm so excited that this exists.
man.
It's just
That's
such a
really
sad
fun.
thing.
Yeah, it is a sad looking thing.
This is, I think, my favorite thing is just the cryptids that come along with it. I mean, like, there's so many. Like Slenderman is a cryptid and all that stuff too. So there's just so
You know,
much to like unpack in this.
we should
So
we should take a bunch of these pictures though and just throw them into the notes just for the uh Patreons,
yes.
Patreon peoples. Interesting. Some of these cryptids are very mundane, but
Oh yeah, there's a lot of boring ones. They're like, oh, and most likely it's just like a mutated bird or something.
yeah. One was like it was a lion but with a leopard's body. I was like, God, I don't even know if I
Ooh.
would know that that wasn't it. Like if I saw a real one, I'd be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like I wouldn't
That's
be
a big
afraid of
cat.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be the normal afraid of that. Where I'm like, I don't want to deal with that.
So I'm looking up essentially I just googled Chinese cryptids and African cryptids just to get like a list of things to read.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so I'll just kind of go through them. Like I said, some of these are kind of silly, but
Yeah.
some are pretty cool. That the terrifying tree thing.
Yeah, the tree that grows human heads, horrifying.
Yeah.
Don't like that.
Um s- oh, a furry sea creature, a trunco. Okay.
Oh.
The last one here. A Nandi bear. Okay. Yeah, this weird sea. Snow white fur, an elephant trunk, a lobster tail.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So if we find a good natural point where we want to just list a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I'm down for that. We could probably do
Cool.
that like right at the end where we say other examples of cryptids. We could probably do that where you added the will o' the wisp. We could probably add a few more of those.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started on this guy.
Let's do it. Me.
Me, 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 me. Please publish my peanut butter papers.
Please publish my peanut butter papers.
So I work
The
on
Human
softening
Torch.
my P's and B's.
The Human Torch has oddly shaped feet.
Hmm.
No, the Human Torch was denied a bank loan. That's what it is.
That's
The
right.
arsonist.
The arsonist.
The arsonist has oddly shaped feet.
Both conflagrations.
The
I,
arsonist has oddly shaped feet.
I don't have an intro. Who am I today?
It'd be good to give yourself like a local cryptid name.
Like Reno cryptids. See if that
Like
exists.
or like even just make one up. Like you are the I don't know. Like what's like a feature of Reno?
We're in a rain shadow, so it's very dry. Let's see here. Local cryptids, supernatural, R subreddit Reno. This is fun. Oh, Tahoe Tessie. Yep. Duh.
There you go. What's Tahoe's Tessie's just what a Loch Ness monster version of just in Tahoe?
Yep.
I love
That
it.
is it. All right. All right, ready?
I'm ready.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your host, Tahoe Tessie, also known as Abraham.
And I am your host, the Skunk Ape, or your other host, Shane.
We are a psychology podcast, and we talk about all of the psychology things that we do, that humans are, and what we be. And in October, we set aside a few episodes to talk about some spooky, scary things that are also related to psychology. And we are entering our final chapter for this year's anthology, if you will, of fun, spooky things. What are we talking about, Shane?
Today, we're talking about cryptids, which is one of my all-time favorite topics to talk about ever, forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. Super fun. So, before we get into that, if you would like to support the show because you also like cryptids, well, then you can leave us a rating and review. You can join us on Patreon. You can buy some merch. You can... Oh, I had a fun new one that I forgot. Let's see here. Beep. You can take out a vanity plate that says WWD, WWD. All of those things you can do. I'll talk more about that at the end of the show. And Shane, do you know what day this comes out?
This comes out on October 26th.
It does. And there's a few things to celebrate on October 26th. We'll acknowledge that the month of October by itself has a few holidays, and we've mentioned most of them, but the two I feel like I don't think that we've mentioned yet are that it is Emotional Intelligence Awareness Month,
Okay.
which is exactly what it sounds like, and also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, in case you weren't aware.
That's a good thing to be aware about.
Yep. Now, it is also, as we said, October 26th, which means that there are a few things we would like to acknowledge for celebrating. One is it is National Mule Day, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
It
fun.
is Howl at the Moon Day, which makes sense.
Which is even more fun. If you've never howled at the moon, go do that. See what happens.
It is National Pumpkin Day, which I'm very much in support of.
Yes, 100%.
And importantly, it is also National Micro Needling Day.
Yes, Pinhead is stoked.
Yes. This is the origin story of Pinhead.
Yeah, it starts small. It always starts small. Don't open the lament configuration.
So you might be transporting some mules or transporting some pumpkins on a mule while you howl at the moon after getting some micro needling done.
Yeah,
I guess that all makes sense to me.
Yeah, just do it all together.
And then you're on top. You're on top of.
You're winning October.
You're winning October. It's specifically October 26th, but yeah, you're winning October. All right. Yeah. So as we said, talking about some cryptids things, and I think let's start by just talking about the fact that in this discussion, what we're going to be doing is talking about a lot of what cryptids are and why people have believed in them, and also just talking about some cryptids.
Yeah, some fun stuff. So as we go into this discussion, we want you to remember a specific phrase that should just be in your general lexicon. It should be there, like it should be strength in your repertoires. And that is the quote from Carl Sagan that says, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." So I want you to think about this and kind of keep that as like a general guiding principle as we explore the idea of cryptids. And it's just kind of a good way to be a skeptic, I think.
Absolutely. And as you said, a guiding principle that is useful to have there. A rewording of the Laplace's principle, which states, quote, "The weight of evidence for an extraordinary claim must be proportioned to its strangeness," end quote, which says a little bit more about it. Yeah. But gives the context necessary, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've kind of primed you for this episode, we have to talk about what cryptids are. And cryptids are an animal or creature that has been claimed to exist but never proven to exist. So keep that in mind. An animal that has claimed to have existed but has never been proven to actually exist.
You can imagine right away some things that you might be thinking that would count as cryptids, and you're probably right. We'll list quite a few as we go through here. But there is even a study of cryptids, and it is appropriately called cryptozoology. Now, this is a pseudoscience and a subculture that searches for and studies unknown, legendary, or extinct animals whose existence has been disputed or unsubstantiated or rooted entirely in folklore with no other evidence to support the fact that they existed. So, sorry, cryptozoologists, you are mostly entertainment value. And we love the entertainment that we get from this, but it is entertainment value.
Yeah, and so what you'll find is that they'll either search for creatures that have been reported that there's only one of those creatures that exist, or a lot of them, probably like the more science-y based ones, would be the ones that study and search for creatures that are known to be extinct. Like, so for example, the megalodon is an example of a creature that we know existed. There is evidence that it existed, but there is no longer evidence that it currently exists, unless you watch the movie The Meg.
Very good evidence that it actually exists.
Yes, thank you, Jason Statham. Now, how is cryptozoology different than, say, maybe a marine biologist looking for new sea creatures or NASA searching for signs of life? It's worth pointing out the difference here.
Yeah, and the difference is in the nature of the phenomenon, and also I think the general orientation to the study of the people doing the studying. Because in cryptozoology, the research question, using that term loosely and liberally, is whether something exists despite there being no quantifiable evidence that it does. So no really substantiated piece of information that suggests that it really does exist, mostly that someone said that it exists and now we're looking for it. Now, in any other science, the initial research question asks whether something exists whether something may exist based on the existing evidence. So essentially, we have evidence of a thing existing. Now we're going to go find out more about it. Or in the extent to which it exists, to which we can find knowledge. And a good example of that, I think, is the giant squid, which we have found giant squid. We've seen them. They're just very elusive. They're difficult to find. We're not sure how many there are. And so we know that they exist. We just don't know a lot about them.
Yeah. Also, if you are somebody who is afraid of the ocean, horrible creature to exist. No thanks. That is a terrifying thing. But I think the thing is too is, you know, a lot of times what we'll find is in like pseudoscience, and specifically this happens with cryptozoology, is that the conclusion is already made, right? They go, this creature exists. Now I'm going to do all of my things to find this creature. Whereas in other sciences, they go, hey, there's evidence of this kind of strange life form. Let's look and explore and see if we can find this thing that is kind of leaving these breadcrumbs, if you will.
Yeah. Good distinction there.
Yeah, and if you're not quite sure what we mean, here's an example of what this might look like in practice. So for NASA, if they're looking for life on Mars, they're not entering the experiment or the exploratory phase in saying, "quote aliens are reported to exist. Let's find their footprints." End quote. That's not what they're doing. What they're
Right.
doing instead is they are going, "quote this planet may be hosting and may have hosted life at some point, as evidenced by water, ice, geological structures. So let's see if they left something behind. Let's see if we can
Yeah.
find evidence that they were here because all of the features of the planet suggest that they could have been here."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's sort of like the conditions were right that it could exist. Let's look for the signs that should be there if it did exist. And if there aren't any, then we can conclude, at least somewhat, tentatively, but with some reasonable level of certainty, that it didn't. And if we do find those signs, then we can conclude with some reasonable level of certainty that it did.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be things that it does. And I think another sort of similar example, there was this flower. I'm gonna get this very wrong because I'm recalling this on the spot, and this is not part of original research. But there is this
Yeah, yeah.
flower, I believe, that exists somewhere in like a rainforest or a jungle somewhere, that has this really really long, like deep sort of tube where the pollen was.
Yeah.
And somebody speculated, and I think this is attributed to Darwin, but I'm not sure. But somebody speculated that there must be this moth or bird with a very very long tongue that could reach in and get the pollen out of this, or something like that. And again, this was based on the fact that like it didn't make a lot of sense that something would have such that would be able to exist without being able to reproduce in the way that it normally is able to. And so they're
Right.
like, there's got to be something going on here we're missing. And it turns out they were right. They were finally able to capture an image of this moth that has this crazy long tongue that like unfurls and goes
Yeah.
way deep inside this flower. And that's another good example of like we had reason to believe something like that existed. We just needed to find the actual thing.
Right, exactly. And they weren't going, there must be a giant moth here. It was more so, hey, this thing exists. What would help pollinate this plant?
Yeah.
Right? Whereas like where a cryptozoologist might say something like this, they might go and say, we know that aliens exist based on all the reports we've gotten from people, despite the fact there's no tangible evidence. Let's go confirm these reports. Or in that example, they would say, there is a long beaked bird that's out here. Let's confirm that this thing exists because we know it exists, instead of being like, there's something that does this. Like that's kind of the difference between the two. And it might be a subtle difference, but it's enough.
Yeah. It's important, in orienting to essentially where you start with a hypothesis and then you test that hypothesis versus starting with like a conclusion and then you see only the evidence you want to see for that conclusion, which
Yeah.
which looks beep. And so this is the subtle difference between discovery versus confirmation. Seeking confirmation for an established conclusion is not how we go about doing science,
Right.
generally speaking, because what we're actually often trying to do is prove ourselves wrong. Because if we can't prove ourselves wrong, then we feel really good about our hypotheses and about our theories. And instead, the other way around is trying to prove yourself right by searching for all available evidence. And man, we are good at doing that, even if there is zero evidence whatsoever. Matter of fact, there
Yeah.
is a whole like effect that is named after this called confirmation bias.
Yes. So you knew we were going to get here. We had to. So originally, this was studied by Peter Wason, and Wason's rule discovery task or confirmation bias essentially demonstrates that people will seek information that confirms their already existing belief. So, in short, what that means is I have a belief. I will find all the evidence possible to confirm that belief, rather than holding that belief lightly and letting it go in the event that I find new evidence.
Sorry, a quick note down below. Um, okay. Where are we? Where are we?
We're in cryptozoology, researchers tend to hold the belief that a creature exists.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Beep. All right. So as we are mentioning, as you're just talking about, in cryptozoology, these people who might call themselves researchers, the people who are the proprietors of, you will, if you will, of Jesus Christ, of cryptozoology tend to hold the belief that a creature exists. And as a result, all of their observations, all their experiments, and data analysis will only include the information that works to confirm their established belief. At the very most, I think what you'll expect is it might set some parameters on their belief beyond what they wanted,
Mhm.
but they're almost never going to find disconfirming evidence.
Well, right, and there's always a moving goalpost. I mean, we see this with flat Earth research, right? Like that's what happens. Like a study will be conducted for flat to prove flat Earth is a real thing, and then when the evidence is to the contrary, they go, well, actually, there's this phenomenon, and there's always something
Yeah.
else to kind of go against it.
Yeah, this study wasn't actually good enough now. And
Right.
so like there was something else that was affecting it that made it turn out this way. So that now we can't trust the results of the study. I'm like,
Yeah.
or you're wrong.
Or you're wrong, and that's exactly the thing. So confirmation bias is a consistent presence in pseudoscience and specifically in flat Earth research that we talked about it. Then think about this: they'll say that the Earth is flat. Every experiment you see is an attempt to prove that the Earth is flat and not gather information about what is observable and measurable. So they will go, the Earth is flat. Here's how I know. Here's my proof. Instead of going, let's see what happens with this experiment and then see what conclusions we come out of this with.
And actually, similar to what you were saying there is related to that is they'll work as hard to try and refute and argue against the disconfirming evidence, the evidence that is contradictory to their hypothesis. They'll work as hard or harder to try and refute that evidence than they will to be able to try and recruit actual evidence to their cause. So,
Yeah.
why the quick break to talk about confirmation bias? Well, because it's time for a quick break to talk about some ads.
Ha.
Okay, so let's talk about. I totally screwed that up. I was thinking the next part would. Okay, never mind. I got this. Beep. Okay, so we were just saying that in cryptid research, the argument is that the creature already exists, so we need to find it. And so there's this confirmation bias that's part of something that cryptozoologists bring to the table, essentially as part of their method. Their research method is confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about some famous cryptids that they're out on the hunt for.
Yes. So when you search for cryptids, there are a few different subsets that are worth exploring. There's aquatic, terrestrial, and aerial, or winged, which is horrifying to think of, like winged creatures out there that are these types of monsters. And so that's a lot of the main classifications you'll see when people do talk about these types of these animals.
And not dissimlarly from UAPs, there are some classifications that can be found regarding the types of cryptids that are out there. You can find these classifications on cryptids with a Z fandom.com. And these include unconfirmed, discredited, proposed, and extinct. Okay. And so there's actually not a confirmed category, which is interesting.
Weird, right?
But we have unconfirmed creatures alleged but not proven. The discredited category, creature with a body of evidence against their existence. Functionally all of them.
Yeah.
The proposed category, creature with an alternative explanation accepted by the scientific community. Also, a lot of them. And then extinct, creatures that have been labeled extinct by the scientific community, but are believed to have an extant relic population. This is actually one of the arguments I've heard for the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah. So in biogeography and paleontology, a relict is a population of organisms that was more widespread or diverse in the past, but the current population is extremely restricted. And you might see something like similar to this, or kind of like this, where you have the Galapagos Islands, where there's a very unique ecosystem that exists there and very unique creatures. Same thing with Australia, very unique creatures that exist in this area of the world and literally nowhere else in the world. And so that's a lot of kind of the argument, is like, we have these ecosystems that prove that this is a thing that can happen, but a lot of times cryptids are not those creatures. Tortoises are confirmed, right?
Yes, they are confirmed
in these ecosystems, whereas like something like the Bigfoot, which we're going to talk about, only existed in a very specific place at a specific time, and there are no other sightings, and there's no relict population as a result of this.
Speaking of Bigfoot, also called Sasquatch, also I think referred to loosely as a Yeti. By some people use those interchangeably.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we've all seen the footage, the blurry,
Uh-huh.
upright, walking apish creature walking into the woods.
Uh-huh.
If you haven't, it can be a wild view.
Yeah.
They parodied this in the movie Elf, with Elf
Uh-huh.
walking into the woods. He basically had the exact
Yes.
same gait and stride and orientation. And I believe they've also parodied this on The Simpsons.
Oh yeah.
Supposedly, this creature, for the American version of it at least, lives in the woods of North America. It's been observed by folks, with some people providing video and audio evidence, as well as casts of large footprints in the area. So these are the Bigfoot hunters that are out there.
Yeah. Now, its origin, people say that it's likely a combination of indigenous folklore, misidentification, and hoax. We'll talk about misidentification later as one of the reasons why this comes up. No, so for instance, the Wendigo, which is a mythological creature found in a lot of indigenous populations, can be described in many, and it's actually, the Wendigo is described in many First Nations communities as well. And it walks upright, has humanoid-like features, and some iterations have horns. Some iterations say it's a human cannibal hybrid type of thing, but it is like a folklore that's kind of maybe evolved over time.
I think actually I mentioned in one of my recommendations once, there's a movie I want to say called Antlers that was essentially about a Wendigo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, cool.
Also, Wendigo makes a cameo appearance in Pet Cemetery.
Oh, nice. Okay. And there was another Netflix movie. I'm forgetting what it was called now, but the antagonist monster ended up, I think, being a sort of spin on that same creature. So,
That makes sense.
all right. So that was Bigfoot. Let's talk about the Loch Ness monster, old
Ooh,
Nessie.
Nessie.
Loch Ness is described as having a long neck, a hump on its back, and resembling some type of aquatic dinosaur. Nessie has been in the cryptid mainstream since about 1934, presumably spotted by somebody there who later revealed that they were pulling a prank, and others who have tried to. There's a very famous picture that someone took that is essentially of a small log poking out of the water, but they like walked way far away and zoomed way in on it, and it's this blurry thing that looks like it has sort of a crook of a neck sticking out of the water, and so it gives the appearance of being a water creature, even though it's a very blurry stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some sightings of Nessie go back as early as 565, described by
That's old.
Adam, which is an Irish monk who described the creature. But in 1934, that photo that you're talking about, the surgeon's photograph, was shared and reportedly taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson. It sounds like someone who studies animals, right? That's just that's somebody who, like, for sure, 4 first names, they totally study animals, right? No, they do not. He was actually a gynecologist that took this photo, which I thought was really interesting. And some folks were immediately skeptical of the photo, calling it a piece of driftwood or an elephant. That was a thing that people were like, it could be an elephant.
It doesn't look like an elephant.
Yeah. And later it was determined that the original photo was most likely a toy submarine. It was a really elaborate hoax. Yeah. So but there is a second photo that is a piece of driftwood too. So there are multiple photos that do exist of this thing. I mean, people have spent decades dredging the lake, like diving, trying to find this thing. Decades of this based on this hoax. So this is almost 100 years of hoax that have come out of this, like about the Loch Ness monster. So I'm sorry to ruin it for y'all, but as far as we can tell right now, the Loch Ness monster does not exist on any level.
And there have been multiple podcast episodes just about from other podcasts just about Loch Ness and Nessie, and who have really gone into a really good skeptical dive on why it's highly improbable and almost certain. And just go back to what you were saying, to be fair, Robert Kenneth did study animals. He just studied one type of animal and one specific part of that animal.
Yes. That is a completely fair argument.
All right, let's also talk about the Mothman. We're getting a little bit more supernatural territory here.
Richard Gere type of stuff.
Yep. So straight from West Virginia, along with other myths like high school graduates and mouths full of teeth.
Sorry, West Virginia. I love you. I do. You're a beautiful state, but it was low hanging fruit. Originally, this
That was pretty good. What's funny too is that I read through this before we got started, and I somehow just did not even I missed that part because I didn't see it coming, and it really
yeah,
got me.
you're welcome. There you go. It's sometimes it's subtlety. That's the name of the game here.
It
Now,
is, but we do. Yeah, we love us West Virginia. Honestly, we'll take pot shots like that anytime somebody comes up. We'll just make up something to make fun of them for.
yes, that's the flavor of the show.
Right. Except
We
Florida.
can't help it. Except Florida.
Yeah.
No, Florida's for real. That's a real problem. Now, originally seen in Point Pleasant in 1966, the creature was described as being a large gray creature with glowing red eyes and a 10-foot wingspan, which is already horrifying if you think about that existing in the world. If that was something
Yeah.
that did exist, no thanks.
Yeah.
The creature was reported to be seen by multiple people, including some volunteer firemen, and this was attributed to local birds like a large heron or a sandhill crane. Huge birds, by the way.
Yeah, they're large.
I go work right now, and I work at this house, and there are like 4 sandhill cranes that come and hang out on the property, and they're almost as tall as me. So,
Yeah.
like, they're about like 5.5 feet tall. They're huge.
Yeah. Very large creatures. Sort of like if you ever seen the I think it's called the shoebill stork.
Yeah.
They look
No
like
thanks.
this crazy cartoon dinosaur that's like super big. It
Don't
has
like
a
it.
gigantic beak. Yeah,
Don't like
they're
it.
intense.
Well, birds aren't
the-
real though. We know that, right? Like we do recognize on the show that birds aren't real.
This one might then just be a dinosaur. The legend that is associated with the Mothman is more interesting than all of this, though. In 1967, the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant collapsed, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. And the story was that Mothman is the bringer of bad omens. So the appearance of the Mothman is a signal that things are about to go wrong. So cryptid CMORs, right?
Yeah,
This is for you
Yes.
super nerdy behavior analyst Jack Michael fans.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, it's like it's just this thing shows up, and you're like, oh yeah, things are gonna go wrong. Like I would imagine this thing existed. If it did show up, it already tells me that things are going wrong because it just exists. Like I don't need more. I don't need more at that point in time. If this creature were to show up, I'd be like, yeah, this sucks. Whatever's going on here, this sucks. I don't like this.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to to downplay the horror.
Yes. Now, another cryptid I thought was really fun is the Mongolian deathworm, which has such a cool name.
That is a very cool name. I dig that.
Yeah. Now, supposedly, this thing lives in the Gobi Desert and was first described in the book On the Trail of Ancient Man by Roy Chapman Andrew in 1926.
It was described as being shaped like a sausage, which
Okay.
cool.
Not scary.
It reaches the length of 2 feet long. A
So
single
2 foot sausage.
touch would it's big for a sausage. A single touch would mean instant death for the victim. So is apparently a poisonous creature.
Yes.
And that it only lives in the most remote, desolate parts of the Gobi Desert. So
Yes.
very rare find indeed. Hard for me. I mean, I guess I can sort of wrap my head around generally the idea of a super poisonous worm in an area like that, as a way for like if it was a predatory worm. I guess that's what they're saying. Is this is a predatory worm, right?
Kind of.
Okay.
Maybe.
I mean, it could be defensive, like a bird sees it and like swoops down and bites it and then just dies instantly.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It sounds scary though. I don't like that. Now, in
Yeah.
1990 and 1992, an expedition was sent to the Gobi Desert after the group that was on the expedition was inspired by Dune. I shall not fear, for fear is the mind killer. They used the same techniques that the Fremen used to call the Shai-Hulud. If you're familiar with Dune, the Fremen being the people of the desert that rode the Shai-Hulud, the giant sandworms. They used these things called thumpers to produce a sound to drive out the worms. The thumpers were kind of like this rhythmic beating on the ground that would drive, that they thought would drive these worms out of the ground. What they found was it was not effective. How dare they think to call upon the old man of the desert, these mere mortals?
Well, and most of us know that if you just oversaturate a ground with water, then the worms will come out. So I don't know why they didn't try that.
Yeah, I mean, I've simple science. I mean, they're cryptozoologists, so I guess maybe they're like,
True.
no, water won't work.
Yeah. Should have tried like a dance while playing a flute or something.
They could have literally
Um,
tried anything else.
yeah. Some believe that that the issue with this particular worm, the Mongolian death worm, is an issue of misidentification, and that the death worm was actually a pit viper, which would make a lot of sense because we know that
Yeah,
those exist and they also will kill you.
yeah,
So, I'm given to understand. I think pit vipers are pretty venomous, right?
yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
they got a hell of a bite, from what I
Oh,
understand.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the Mongolian death worm.
Yeah, and I mean, those are just a couple that we wanted to highlight that showed like different parts of the world and different types, right? So there's like more like mammal-like creatures, there's bird-like creatures, there's insect-like creatures. But there are a lot of other examples of cryptids that are worth talking about. One of them is the Yeti, which is also known as the abominable snowman, which actually has like a kind of a fascinating thing. This creature is also a Bigfoot, copy and paste, but snowy, kind of like how Sub-Zero is just a copy and paste of Scorpion in Mortal
Yeah.
Kombat. Literally the same thing. It's just a palette swap. Now this one comes from Sherpa folklore though, and it's likely just misidentified bears or yaks.
There's a thunderbird, arguably the coolest name of any cryptid we'll cover. And
Yes.
this creature is described by North American indigenous peoples as being a supernatural creature of power and strength. And as its name would imply, it creates thunder by flapping its wings and lightning by flashing its eyes.
I love it. It's so cool. Thunderbirds are so cool. I genuinely think that's the coolest one so far.
Yeah.
Now there's the Jersey Devil, which is also like where the hockey team, the New Jersey Devils, get their name from. And it's from South Jersey and Philly.
Mm.
And this creature wears Adidas tracksuits and yells at you about how the Eagles are going to go all the way this year. Or the actual cryptid is maybe it's a winged and hooved bipedal creature, or bipedal creature that resides in the Pine Barrens, which sounds horrible, and screams at you. So it's definitely from Jersey.
Yeah, this featured prominently on Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
There's something called a yowie, or maybe a yowie.
Uh-huh.
This is a creature that has its roots in Aboriginal oral history and resides in the outback, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Described as a hairy ape-like creature. Patterns, folks, maybe.
Starting to see something here?
It feels like maybe we've heard of something like this before.
Yeah.
Some describe it as being shy. I think we tend to look for humanoid type creatures a lot.
Yeah. And also just might be just a person that they just go, that's a person in the distance and we don't know how to describe them.
It was actually just Shane.
It's just me. It's me. I'm in all these places. So I'm a Yeti, a Yowie, and a Sasquatch. So, and also speaking of Floridian cryptids, a skunk ape.
Hey, there you go.
Hey, there we go. So skunk ape is a Florida Bigfoot. So it loves NASCAR and arm wrestling alligators. It supposedly has similar features to Bigfoot, though it supposedly smells worse. So like it looks like Bigfoot, but it just smells worse. It's probably the humidity. It just like sweats literally all the time here.
Yeah, just a lot of extra bacteria and all the crevices and cracks and whatnot.
Yeah, no thanks. Gross.
Another American centric one here. We have the chupacabra, or the goat sucker. First sightings were in Puerto Rico in 1995. This creature is being very reptilian, the size of a small bear, with rows of spines reaching from its neck to its tail. Although others describe it as dog-like. Spooky. So
spooky.
there are a lot of ideas about what a chupacabra looks like. So there's not like a hard and fast definite thing that it is, but if you look up, like, just Google images of it, you'll get all kinds of really fun and interesting and weird artist depictions of what a chupacabra might look like.
Yeah, so wild. And the thing is like, we're kind of bringing these up, but they usually come from one thing that we'll probably talk about later. Actually, we won't talk about this. I didn't cover this in the behavioral scientific view. But one of the things to think about is that a lot of times some phenomenon will happen locally and it's unexplained, and so people will try to find an explanation for it. So for the chupacabra, a lot of cattle were dying, a lot of goats were dying, and they were finding like dead animals a lot, and then they would find like these weird strange creatures, like they would see something that they couldn't identify, and that's kind of part of where the chupacabra lore would come from.
We saw that a lot with COVID. It's that
Yeah.
something that people didn't like happened, and they made up explanations for it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how we know it's a hoax. Or people think it's a hoax, I should say, because we know it's not.
Yeah, so we know it's not a hoax.
We know it's not. Now, there's also the Ningen, which is a humanoid whale creature that has by far the saddest face I've ever seen on a cryptid description ever. When you look it up, it is so sad. And we'll include some stuff in the show notes and whatnot. But this creature inhabits subantarctic oceans, I should say. It wasn't reported until 2002. So I really like this. There are new creatures cropping up in cryptid folklore, despite the fact that we have like advanced technology and all this stuff to kind of maybe capture this stuff.
Yes. Another one is kind of a weird one. This is the will o' the wisp, and this is the idea in old sort of folklore and whatnot that people who were maybe lost, these usually come out at nighttime. They're usually in sort of boggy, swampy, marshy areas, and there were these sort of phantom lights, these ghost lights that would appear, but they almost looked like a lantern. And people would follow this into the swamps and get lost, or they would fall into the water, or they'd get attacked by a creature, or maybe the will o' the wisp would actually get them. But the will o' the wisp essentially leads people astray. A lot of other names it had. It actually was even called a jack-o'-lantern by some. There was like a honey light, maybe. There's different, like, all kinds of names that it's been given. That it sort of is the name for this idea. But the will o' the wisp also has been used as a metaphor for a impossible to reach ambition of some sort, some goal or something that you are pursuing relentlessly, but there's no way you're actually going to make it, like a woman becoming president in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. There's also mermaids. Mermaids are a cryptid. Mermaids are wild, and I love these stories, like the mermaids and the sirens and stuff. And a lot of it comes from maybe some kind of maybe some mythology and some folklore that goes along with the sirens, that the sirens would sing and lead sailors to death. And that came from a lot of like Greek and Roman mythology and all that. But a lot of sailors will report seeing beautiful half fish, half women creatures hanging out on rocks and singing to them and calling them, and many people think they were just manatees, which is really my favorite part of that, because if you see a manatee, it is not a beautiful creature. It is adorable, it is wonderful, and it is very, very sweet. It's the gentlest thing on the planet, but they are huge, and they are not pretty.
Yeah. I did hear about an explorer who saw a manatee and was like, look at that beautiful sea woman, maybe not as handsome as I would have thought, but still pretty, and like had these like affectionate feelings, sort of like you've been lonely at sea for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's part of it, is like you're at sea for a long time. Like I imagine there's probably some psychosis that goes along with that. Like, I mean, we probably need to do the psychology of pirates at some point in time, because I feel like there's something there. But yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, if you look at a manatee, if you've never seen one, they just look like sad walruses without the teeth.
They do. They look like sad walruses without the teeth.
Yeah.
And then one more attack real quick is this idea of a jackalope. This is essentially a rabbit, a jackrabbit that has antlers. And so it's just kind of a hybrid of a couple of different features of animals. Have never been shown to exist, but kind of a cool idea. A few of these, by the way, have shown up in sort of those like those mystery houses, like P.T. Barnum's sort of freak show thing. He
like sideshow things.
He would have these things in a jar or in a cage, or like taxidermied. Mermaid was one of them. Somebody grossly taxidermied a part of a monkey onto part of a fish, I think, for the mermaid there. And then I've heard of like them doing like a chupacabra type thing, and of course they take the skull of a rabbit and just essentially fused screwed on some antlers, and we're like, look at the jackalope skull.
Yeah, you can see that at Ripley's Believe It or Not too. That's a
that sort of
easy
thing.
place to find that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I just realized we like blew past our ads, and like the will of the wisp, they're trying to catch up to us and lead us astray, and they're succeeding.
Nice.
All right, let's get more into, so we've been talking about the cryptids. We've been talking about some ideas about why people have believed in cryptids and what kind of biases we bring to the table. Let's really dig into the science of this now.
Yeah, and one of the most the simplest explanations for why cryptids end up existing or why people think they exist is this issue of misidentification. This is the most common kind of error that goes on with the scientific method and the observation in cryptozoology. And so, for example, in cases like Bigfoot, some scientists argue that the belief possibly started as a misidentification of some other native species. Now, that might seem like a stretch when you see that video, but that misidentification piece is common when we see aquatic creatures where we can't observe their full body, or if you see a creature at night and you can't really see any of its core features. So similarities to bears, apes, even humans in costumes have been cited as possible explanations for a phenomenon like Bigfoot and Yetis and Sasquatches and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And this may also be the case for variations of species or for species that have, for some reason, a genetic mutation of some sort. So consider for a moment a creature that resembles a snake, but it has small legs, right?
Yeah.
And so a new species does not necessarily constitute a cryptid. Instead, undiscovered species or species variations may produce some unique stories. And so you might see something that is like unexpected, and then from there extrapolate that out to some mysterious new creature.
Right. I mean, imagine like before people really understood how science and observation worked, when you see somebody who doesn't have training in that and they see a mutated snake that's got two heads, they go, oh, it's this, it's it's whatever, and they kind of like make up it's a hydra, and then they kind of like share that story, and then it turns into whatever, because like that's very difficult to confirm unless you can see that, right? You see one snake with two heads, and then you kind of go, oh, I saw a snake with two heads, and nobody believes you, and now you're the class clown of the village. So like it's very easy for that stuff to kind of carry over, and that's where the second part of this issue is folklore and storytelling comes in, right? So the idea of folklore and storytelling, they're large parts of just basic cultural behaviors, cultural practices. They tend to highlight values and practices within a specific culture. So when people share stories and kind of parables, and I mean the Bible is an example of a book full of parables, right? That specifically highlight certain values, and people take that and do what they will with it. But for example, indigenous peoples may value the power residing in the earth. So cryptids like the thunderbird are just revered. They are worshipped. They are deities essentially. Others may be cautionary tales to stay away from certain places, like the Mongolian death worm or the Jersey devil. Don't go to the Pine Barrens. Don't go to the Gobi Desert, because this is
Don't
what's
go
going
to New Jersey.
Don't go to New Jersey because of the Jersey Devil, right? And those Adidas tracksuits. But when you go there, that's exactly it. These stories exist as like cautionary tales.
Got it. And then, of course, there's some filling in the gaps going on, that when humans lack information, we tend to fill in the gaps with our own conclusions and inferences. And in the face of the unknown, we're likely to just close that gap with information, So humans, we tend to be sort of problem solvers. And we like answers. And so when we find something that we don't know what it is, we do our best to explain the circumstance and try and figure out what that thing is. And in some cases, those gaps are filled by implausible explanations or unrelated quote unquote evidence, using the term lightly.
Yeah.
And our imaginations are fantastic for things like this. We're very good at just conceptually making something up that could possibly work because we're, I think, so creatively flexible in how we can think of things that relate to one another in a very dynamic way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the last thing that's worth accounting for, and this is true for any sort of like cryptid research or like ufology and all that, is this idea of anecdotal data. Now, the biggest challenge to cryptid research, besides literally everything, is the fact that the majority of data is anecdotal. And there's really nothing wrong with anecdotal reports. You can't really argue against somebody's experience or their perception. That's you can, but it's very difficult to convince somebody if they believe that their experience was real or their observation was real. And so there's really nothing wrong with anecdotal reports, but if that's the only data source that's available and there's nothing else to corroborate it or to confirm the phenomenon, we don't have extraordinary evidence. So we can't
Yeah.
make the extraordinary claim that this thing exists.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, missing the crucial part there. Many cryptid creatures have extraordinary powers,
Uh-huh.
or some equally outlandish description or characteristic. There simply isn't quantifiable evidence that any of these creatures actually exist, despite the ongoing reports from folks. And many of them just stopped being in sort of the cultural awareness. And it's
Yeah.
because people stopped caring. Like, it wasn't real. There was no evidence for it. And people are kind of like,
Right.
whatever, and kind of moved on.
Right. And on top of that, hoaxes make all of those anecdotal reports less and less reliable. So when something does come up, people are becoming more skeptical, not only because people are gaining more education and knowledge about the world around them, but the other part is that there's been so many hoaxes and so many false stories and so much storytelling around stuff that those reports, those anecdotal reports from people who have those experiences, or maybe, talk about those experiences, they're not reliable anymore. And as more hoaxes start to be discovered, the believability of stories from people who have had quote unquote real experiences become less and less viable, less and less valid, and less believable.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that's anecdotal data, is just the fact that like there seems to be some brief glimpses of a thing, and that people just take that and run with it way beyond what the evidence actually supports as being realistic. And
Yes.
while it is fun, just acknowledging that it can sometimes be a distraction from doing the actual work to find things. So
Yeah.
just making sure we are able to sort of find the line between folklore and real evidence for things, and that way we don't waste our time and our efforts on things that there's no reason to believe that they exist, and are unlikely to pan out anything.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to waste resources. That's what it comes down to. And ultimately expeditions to find stuff like the Mongolian death worm become a waste of resources. They become a waste of money and a waste of time, and put people in danger to find these creatures that are just do not exist.
When we waste resources, we turn into Mad Max.
Yes. And then we don't want to deal with Fury Road. That's a lot. That movie is great. I should watch that soon. That it's like
Yeah.
that. It's like that script was written in caps lock.
Fun. Well, I also thought it'd be fun to just list a bunch of random cryptids. We got a little time, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna list 9 that live in Africa. I'm not gonna give much of a description of any of these. I'm just gonna say them, and then feel free to look them up if you're interested. But I'll give just a brief description, really. There's something called the Ajul, or maybe the Ajule, which is also called a bush dog. A dingo neck, which looks like a lion's head on the body of a giant scaled snake, and a rhino
Mm-hmm.
horn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we have the Fofi, is the Congolese giant spider. It looks like it's towering a good 25 feet in the air, um, and absolutely huge. And obviously, it has an exoskeleton, so it wouldn't want that if you were a creature that large. There is something called the Murotsi, which is just a lion's head on a leopard's body. Agogwe, which is also called the Kakandakari, or the Kilomba, is a human-like creature. It looks very much like a monkey, or an ape of some kind that is transitioning into human,
That's
if you
fun.
will. Yeah, we've got the Inkanyamba, I'm guessing. It looks like a snake, but with a horse's head. The picture that I see actually looks more like uh, a brontosaurus, but with the head of a anglerfish.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Um, the mamlambo is also called the brain sucker. This is a type of fish as well.
Don't like
It
that.
drags its victims into the river and eats only the head and brains, is the idea.
Oh, that sounds like a cautionary tale.
Yeah, it does. There's
Yeah.
the trunco, which is described as being a snowy white furry aquatic creature with an elephant trunk and a lobster-like tail, that is supposed to be like a small whale kind of, but furry. And then finally we have the Nandi bear, which has been seen all over Africa and has a lot of different names. And kind of just looks, it kind of looks like a cross, honestly, between a bear and a jackal in the image that I see here.
So wild. I love it.
Yeah.
So I have a book on my end called Cryptid Creatures of Florida, and it's a second edition.
Yes.
Just so you know,
Yes.
that means, which suggests that there were revisions based on new information. And so there are a couple. I'm not even going to describe them. I can just
Okay.
tell you right now, a lot of Florida creatures are either really stinky because they're in swamps, or they're mostly aquatic and
Okay.
reptilian. So
Okay.
there's the Lake Clinch monster, which they think might have been an anaconda. There's the Pensacola sea monster. There's St. Augustine's giant octopus. They mentioned megalodons. They mentioned giant alligators. There's the giant Juno worm. There's the Lake Worth sea monster. There's a muck monster, the sea devil, the three-toed monster. They talk about pterosaurs in Palm Beach, which I'm pretty sure are just people with too much plastic surgery. You've got Thunderbirds, Hog Kong, Okeechobee serpents. You've got the elusive Jaguarundi. You got the Carabel cat mystery. Ooh, I like that. Wampus, or like a good cat mystery. You know, is a good way to rile up your folks, your community. There's the Wampus cat. There's the Cracker Dog killer. There's the Aster dinosaur. And then there's biographical index. I don't know what kind of cryptid that is, but I guess that might be in here. I don't know. So
That's pretty good. I like that. That's a good
yeah,
joke.
I'm stoked. I'm stoked. There's some good. So this book, if you really want to check this out, there's some really great drawings in here, and most of them are just it looks like just some unidentified creature, like a bobcat or a lynx or a panther,
Yeah.
or just some sea creature that like some kind of snake, some giant snake that they don't look at. I didn't realize this. The Aster dinosaur it says it has its beginnings at a crossroads of sorts where old Indian and Spanish trails came together as they crisscrossed the state. It's near the banks of the St. Johns River, and literally this is right down the road from me. This is like a 30-minute drive from me.
Wow.
And it basically looks like it kind of looks like some kind of they describe a dragoon or a dragon. It's got like a rhino horn,
Sure.
but it looks like a dinosaur. It just looks like a dinosaur is what it looks like. So
Okay.
and this is my favorite. At the end of this chapter, it says, "You'll have to be the judge as to which explanation better suits you and Flora's Aster monster," which I think sums up cryptids perfectly.
Right. You whatever speaks to you is the truth.
Yeah.
This is a very dangerous game to play.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, fun stuff.
I'm gonna,
I love this stuff.
I'm going to list a few Chinese cryptids that I looked up. Something called a Yurin, which is a man monkey thing. There's something called the sky serpent, which is there's actually a picture of it. It looks like a photograph someone took. It does look like a very long, skinny cloud, essentially, but like that's kind of windy in a weird way. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It looks like a process I can understand happening in some case. There's something called the Guai Wu. This is another aquatic beast, sort of a Loch Ness monster type thing. The one that was the most distressing to me was the Jinmenju, which is the plant tree that grows fruit. So there's a human tree hybrid that grows smiling human heads as fruit, and then inside of those heads are seeds that also are smiling faces.
Don't like that at all. Do not like that.
And then something called, I'm assuming this is pronounced the Sing Sing, or the Zing Zing or Sing Sing maybe. This is essentially just the Chinese Bigfoot. So
okay, yeah.
yeah.
So I think I really enjoy this stuff because there are just so many different variations of these creatures that exist. It's so great.
Yeah, I see so much. There is so much in here that is that's humanoid. Like I honestly think like a reasonable explanation for a decent chunk of this is the fact that we look for ourselves in the world, because so many of these creatures, a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are just hybrids. We look for just scary monster type creatures, but there's just so much of these things that are they're human in some form. Obviously, one of the most popular that's shown up everywhere is the Bigfoot-like creature, that is obviously very humanoid. But then there's
Right.
the human tree fruit thing that we're looking at here, and a bunch of others like that. So I think there's something in the cryptids that we look for that's like, where do we see ourselves in this, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. I think another explanation, going back to the idea of like just cultural importance, and just it seems like so many of these stories are just cautionary tales. Avoid this place because this monster will
Hmm.
get you. Avoid this because this exists, and it's kind of like it's very much so like The Village. Like The Village, like to me, The Village by M. Night Shyamalan is just an exercise in how cryptids would work in a real life setting if you wanted to prevent people from leaving an area.
Sorry, I got a warning that I was out of disk space again, so I had to. But I know that I just cleared a bunch of space, so I just hit record and it went. But this means it's going to be a little out of sync with your audio. Sorry, Justin.
Okay.
Let's figure out how to fix that. Um, okay, cool. Uh, so we're kind of on take homes, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I think honestly, one of my biggest take homes, I'm gonna give this as a two-part take home, if you will. One is cryptids are fun. I think they're enjoyable, they're entertaining. I enjoy the story, the narrative. I like the trying to the creative imagery that comes from cryptids. I think are really fun and entertaining. The second part to this is there's so much in this space that is like human bias. This
Mm-hmm.
the conspiracy theorist approach of like, look for any and all means that I'm right, ignore any and all means that I'm wrong, type thing, is a place that is, I think, a very dangerous place to be, where we should not
Yeah.
be ideally, and spending too much time in that place, I think, is a problem for just critical thinking in general.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, cryptozoology is not a science. It's a pseudoscience, and it's a pseudoscience that is rife with issues in data collection, in observation, and confirmation bias. Does not follow scientific method. And you know, for all of our cryptozoology fans out there who are practicing, sorry to tell you, there's just not a sufficient process that would make this an actual science. So something to think about.
But if you're the ones making the art, then please keep doing that, and because it's
Yes,
really fun.
please keep making the art. Oh my god, because the Ningen is like my favorite thing.
The sad thing.
The sad thing. It's basically, just so you all know, it looks like Pac-Man, but he's all white and he's sad and he just has big human legs.
Yeah, Pac-Man, a very very pale Pac-Man with
Yes,
human legs.
yes, an Antarctic Pac-Man with
Yeah,
human legs.
distressing but amusing image.
Yes, agreed.
Well, this has been really fun. Do you have anything else to close out before we do some recommendations?
I do not.
All right, let's recommend some things.
Woohoo!
You go first because I'm trying to pull up my list of Patreons.
All right, sounds good. Beep. So my recommendation is a band, and I feel like it's really good for kind of going into winter and that fall season. It's got that feel to it, and it's a band called Cloakroom, and it's an album called Time Well, which is cool. And so they are a very heavy band on Relapse Records. They have kind of a shoegazy type of feel to it, but also like a really doom metal, sludge metal type of feel. So the best way I can describe them is like if you like bands like Hum. If you
Okay.
listen to that, where it's like really big, loud sounds, or like maybe early Smashing Pumpkins, where it's like really big, fuzzy guitars, really loud. It's got a little bit of that feel to it. Not, and so like the songs are longer. If you want a taste of what this band sounds like, go listen to the song "Seedless Star," which is number 4 on Time Well, and you'll get an idea for what that looks like. But they are a really cool band, and I've been listening to them a lot lately.
I feel like you've used hum before as your go-to for a description of shoegaze. Is that your sort of archetype of shoegaze?
I think it's the one that people would know.
Oh, okay.
I think it's one that you just, when you hear it, you're like, oh, this is an example of shoegaze. Like and people, it's kind of, I feel like maybe the bar for some of that stuff.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. I'm recommending a new board game I just got, of course. So, this is
Excellent.
a game called Endless Winter Paleo Americans. This is a Kickstarter
Ooh.
campaign. It was supposed to come out in December of 2021. As you can imagine, the pandemic really, really shut down their ability to develop this game. Well, to produce the game, to get it out and into the market and whatnot. So that so anyway, just got it recently and have been really enjoying it. I think very succinctly to describe it is that it is a game that involves, for people who are familiar with these mechanics, something called worker placement and deck
Okay.
building. And essentially it's that you're just basically you're collecting and spending a bunch of resources, and you can do that
Okay.
through a few different means. And I just think that the design of the game is very clever. I really like that there is always a lot of options. There's a lot of things that you can do, and very little that is like, you're mostly, if you're interacting with other players in a combative way, it's just blocking them from getting access to the same resources or beating them to the resources, maybe.
Okay.
But you're not like directly attacking one another, which I think is appealing. It's like some people really hate the strategy of actually directly attacking one another. Some people love it,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
But in this case, you don't have to, and so I think it appeals to that way. But I just think that the game is well designed. I like the strategy and all of that, and it's very, very pretty to look at. The art is fantastic. So
I love that.
that's what I'm recommending. Endless Winter Paleo Americans by Fantasia Games. Go pick it out. Pick it up.
So good. I love that.
All right, real quick before I move into anything else, we have a couple of corrections slash updates. One is that I don't know why, but completely failed to mention the movie Nope when we were talking about UAPs and UFOs. Fabulous, fabulous movie. That also kind of it actually reminded me of this because we were talking about cryptids, and maybe that's a better description of what's going on in Nope is a cryptid rather than a UAP. Because it becomes identified fairly,
Yeah, that's fair.
halfway through.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that was a really good movie. And then someone, a listener who probably is going to hear this, so shout out to Sella, pointed out to me that we were mispronouncing in our coffee episode that we did. Cafe de Oyo is how it's supposed to be pronounced, or Osho, depending on your dialect where you're from, was the coffee that we talked about. So I wanted to correct that.
Yes. Good work.
Okay. Well, so go ahead and get around to wrapping this up. If you'd like to support the show, you can leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening to your podcast. It actually really does help. It's the cheapest way that you can support us, and it does help us reach more people. So we do appreciate that. You can, of course, join us on Patreon, where you get access to all kinds of benefits, including ad-free episodes, early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and other things. You can also get access to our Discord server where people can chat and talk with one another. You can talk with us pretty easily that way as well. And then you can buy some merch. We have all kinds of merch, and we just keep adding things to the store endlessly and recklessly. So, you go check it out. There's so many things: shirts, sweaters, jackets, mugs, stickers, patches, beanies, more things that I'm missing. There's lots of stuff there that you can get. So go check out our store. Yeah, water bottle, if you're interested in those types of things. And then you can just tell a friend. Word of mouth is actually a great way to spread these things around. And speaking of people who have already joined us on Patreon, I'd like to thank the following list of amazing patrons, which is Amanda, Brad, The Daily BA, Joshua, Justin, Justine, Kelly, Kim, Kostia, Layla, Megan, Mike M, Mike T, Shauna, and Stephanie. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And then, of course, I could not do this without my team, which is Justin, Selena, Kyle, Alan, Jess, and Patrick. And of course, Shane, you did an awesome job putting together the notes for today's episode. And thank you for recording with me today.
I appreciate it. It's so fun.
Do you have anything else before we wrap this up?
No, I don't. I don't at all.
Okay.
Happy Halloween. I think that's
happy Halloween. Yes.
Yeah. Happy Halloween. Thank you all for being here on this journey with the spooky season stuff, because we absolutely love it and we have so much fun with it. And hopefully you do too. I mean, really, truly, these episodes are all about having fun. So
definitely. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me that Halloween will be shortly after this comes out. So, So happy Halloween indeed. Of course, thank you all for listening. That's all that I have got. So I think we'll close it out there. This is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
Cool.
All right.
I no longer have time for a mini.
Okay. No worries. Do your thing.
But thank you so much, Shane.
No, this is always, dude. It's always fun. It's always fun.
Awesome.
All right, I'll get this uploaded now.
Thank you, sir. I already got Justin has already gotten back to me. The serial killers for edits. For
cool.
review. Yeah. So I'm gonna try and listen to that today, so I can get that.
All right, good. And then that'll get us at least. We'll start catching up on some stuff too. If there's once we start, I mean, we'll have like those notes. I know we have a bunch of notes. So maybe like in the next couple of weeks, like maybe sometime in November on a Thursday night, like, or maybe we can plan like one Thursday every month just to record an extra episode. So that'll get us ahead too if we can't do it on Sundays.
Not a bad idea. We're in the place, as you said, where we now have a lot of notes, which is fantastic, and it's really just about recording them at this point, which is cool. Because yes, the recording this one basically puts us back on track for at least having one always ready to go.
Right.
And I'm going to be out a weekend where I'm not going to be able to record at all in early November.
Okay.
So
I think I have one at the end of October too. So we'll have to look at that. I'll double check.
What about next weekend?
Next weekend it should be fine. Yeah, next week I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, if we can knock out 2 next week, and as you said, trying to find another Thursday is probably a good idea also, just to make sure we can do that.
Cool. That sounds good to me.
All right, let's end this for Patreons. Thank you, Patreons.
Bye, patrons.